Hi there. Welcome back to This Nosy Human. I am This Nosy Human. Something a little bit different than last week. I do have, because my dogs are so cute, right? I do have a little bit of a puppy cam uh, down in the corner. So as we talk about what we're going to talk about today, if you have any interest in my dogs, there they are. So this week I went down one heck of a rabbit hole, courtesy of Insider on Instagram. So we're going to take a little bit of a trip down how my brain works, going from Olympic curling all the way to ancient Native American tribes in Ohio. Now, the common thread here, surprisingly, is rocks. So buckle up because we are in for an adventure of geologic proportions. In the Winter Olympics, there's a sport called curling. Not a game I've ever played, but essentially each team pushes a smooth hunk of rock across a large piece of ice, and members of the team sweep the ice in front of the rock to try to control the speed and destination of the rock. The sport kind of reminds me of a combination of like floor darts and bocce ball, but on ice with brooms. Now, full credit to the reel on Instagram from Insider. They did a piece on where these smooth hunks of rocks are sourced. They said that in the last 100 years or so, the granite that is used in curling stones in the Olympics specifically are only from one spot in the world, Elsa Craig. The granite found from this small uninhabited island about 10 miles off the coast of southwestern Scotland is among the hardest and purest in the world, which makes it perfect for the cold temperatures of the ice and the knocking around that these stones do when they hit each other. The material is perfect for smoothly gliding over the ice surface consistently, which is key for upper levels of any sport. They mandate consistency in the Olympics from the type of shoes you can wear to the equipment that people can use so that the people involved are the only variables. So it's not that surprising to me that they're very specific in their measurements, weights, and source of the stones used. But this is where I started down my rabbit hole of curiosity. So the next question I had was an obvious definition of terms. What is granite and what are rocks? So let's start with granite because that's how I went from curling to rocks. Granite is a rock with large grains that you can see without any special equipment. So the reason you can see them is because the crystals are formed slowly as the magma cooled below the Earth's surface. It's made of several minerals, and the combination of these minerals and their proportions are what gives granite different colors like red, black, white, and gray. Rocks are a naturally occurring aggregate of one or more minerals, where the type of mineral can determine the type of rock. So granite is primarily made from quartz and feldspar, but will have smaller amounts of other minerals that give differences in the color that we see. Now, rocks generally have three classes. Sedimentary rocks, which are formed from pre-existing rocks or dead organisms that form deposits that accumulate in distinct layers. Metamorphic rocks, which are from existing rocks that are changed by heat or pressure or reactive fluids. And igneous rocks, which comes from magma and cools. Igneous rocks are very hard and are made of interlocking crystals. So we know that granite is an igneous rock because it comes directly from magma and cools. Now there are two categories of igneous rocks. There's intrusive and extrusive. Intrusive is where the magma cools and crystallizes, but it's still under the Earth's surface, like granite. And extrusive is where lava, which is really just magma but above ground, cools above ground, making it cool quickly so that the crystals formed are too small to see, generally. So granite is intrusive, which led me to question how magma got to the Earth's surface. So I had to look up on how volcanoes form because I remember nothing from high school science. I don't know if you do, but I don't. Essentially, magma chambers form a few miles under the Earth's surface, and you can imagine just how hot that gets and how much pressure builds up. And any crack or weakness in the surrounding stone will have magma spew up and out of the Earth. Now, over time, the lava cools, becomes rocks, and eventually forms the cone-shaped mountains that we think of when we think of volcanoes. One of the outputs of volcanoes, though, is volcanic glass, or what we might think of as obsidian. It's one of my favorite rocks, honestly, and spiritually means safety and grounding. Obsidian is formed when silica-rich lava cools so quickly that there's no time to form crystals, so it turns into a smooth glass. If properly honed, obsidian can get a better edge than even steel. And then, speaking of volcanoes, right? Following the logic here, let's talk about Yellowstone supervolcano. So, underneath Yellowstone National Park sits what is colloquially called a supervolcano, which is a volcano that has the potential to produce a massive eruption, one that will, when it does erupt, cause a ruckus. Now, it hasn't erupted in over 70,000 years, but it has produced a lot of volcanic rock over Earth's lifetime. The volcanic activity in Yellowstone provided many Native American tribes with obsidian via the obsidian cliff within the national park. Obsidian cliff has an exposed vertical thickness of about 98 feet, and archaeologists estimate that the obsidian cliff can completely fill over 3,000 large sports stadiums. Like, just imagine the sheer quantity of rock here. The cliff has been used as a source of obsidian for over 11,000 years. Now, to give a brief reference to where that puts us in human history, the Neolithic Revolution, about 12,000 years ago, was when the transition from hunter-gatherer to agriculture started. East and West developed this independently, so it's kind of a range, but right around there. Now, for even further context, the first known cities in the Middle East were formed about 9,500 years ago. So, before the first cities, ancient peoples were mining obsidian from this cliff. The obsidian cliff is the primary source of obsidian in most Midwestern states and can be found along trade routes from Western Canada all the way to Ohio. That's how we get to Ohio. The Native Americans that use obsidian would use it to make arrowheads, spearheads, knives, and scrapers. Since obsidian is pretty brittle, they were able to fracture the surface until the tool was the right size and shape for what they needed. Something that I stumbled onto when I was looking into the Native American uses of obsidian was the Hopewell culture. The Hopewell culture is a broad network of different economic, political, and spiritual beliefs of different Native American groups that lived between roughly 200 BCE and 500 CE, and they're connected by their construction of enclosures made into geometric patterns and earthen mounds. So primarily located in southern Ohio, there were related groups in Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois, and a few other modern-day states. We don't know what they may have called themselves back then, but today's name comes from the landowner whose property hosted the mounds, so it became a type of site, and the name applied to the entire culture. They seem to have a large network of trade with other groups from the Atlantic coast to the Rocky Mountains that brought them shark's teeth, copper, shells, and obsidian. So the obsidian, here's the connection, came from the obsidian cliff, which is about 2,000 miles away from the Hopewell culture in Ohio. The mounds in the Hopewell culture were often used for religious purposes, including burial sites, according to the best guesses that archaeologists have. Inside one mound, though, archaeologists found more than 300 pounds of obsidian. Imagine how much rock that is. Wild. What's even more wild to me, whether they took trips to Yellowstone themselves or if they traded for it, these ancient Americans valued obsidian enough for it to travel more than half the country. Rocks are fascinating, right? They're just this little ancient nugget of history that can tell us so much about not only the world around us, but what the earth has been through. And like everything, from the ancient uses of obsidian to the modern day very specific uses of granite in the Olympics, rocks have an important part to play in our lives that I don't think I ever really thought about before this little trip through the internet. So as always, we went through a lot of things very quickly. If you have anything you'd like to add about rocks, please meet me in the comments. Until next time, stay curious.